just want to know if you guys know.
Can you do me a favor and clap?
Awesome. All right, now that's the start of the recording. Awesome. All right, we are Nate and Breanne Schiewek, and we are Timothy as well, but he's with my mother, so he'll be here tomorrow because we're dedicating him. We are missionaries in Spain, and for the last, we were here last February. I don't know when we actually spoke, but that was the last time we were home. So we've been there for about a year now. I mean, we've been in Spain since 2015, or 2012 for him and 2015 for myself. And yeah, we had Timothy in April, and we started, we work with YWAM, which is Youth with Mission. It's a Christian organization that works with youth, but also with pretty much anyone of any age. And we do a school that lasts 5 months, and it's called a DTS, Discipleship Training School. And we just finished ours in February. We started it in September, I believe. And I have some videos and photos from it to share. Before I start with that, though, I just wanted to say thank you guys for both of us very much. With Timothy, when he was born, there was an issue and he had to go into the NICU, and then our insurance wasn't covering anything, and then we had to pay out of pocket, and then the insurance company wasn't getting back to us, and we were in a massive amount of essentially debt because we couldn't pay our credit card bills. It was like $10,000, and yeah, I was overwhelmed by everything, obviously giving birth and all of that, and the trauma of having my baby taken the day we thought we were going home, and they're like, you can leave, but we're taking your baby. And we were very shocked, and
your health wasn't good.
And also my health wasn't good, and I had to go back into the emergency room, and I had an infection, and yeah, so we sent a message to Pastor Pat and explaining kind of what happened. You guys, I also shared again on Facebook a couple months later when I was a little bit more here, but that out of the 3 churches that supported us, the other churches have upwards of 500 members. This church, I think, has something like 50. And you guys actually supported us the greatest amount financially in that time. And I'm sorry, emotional about it. And it means a lot to us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the work you do.
We love you.
We love you guys. Okay, so our DTS, the Discipleship Training School that we do, is focused on, like the school is an adventure focus. So we pull in a lot of people who are focused on adventures. So that's usually young people. And this, we bought a lot of dinosaur suits because we do kids ministries. Was this the very first photo you got?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You want to
Sorry.
go back?
No, it's fine. It's fine. This is fine. So the first, we do kids ministry every week, and then sometimes multiple times a week during the class, the lecture phase. This was our first outreach week, which is when we put into practice what we've been learning during the lecture. And we drove 5 hours north to Madrid, and we worked with the YWAM base there. That is our sending base, because we're a pioneering base down in the south. And we made up some clothes things that we gave out to people, and
That was for the Afghani refugees.
thank you.
Yeah.
Madrid had a lot of refugees from Afghanistan come and stay there, and so this is what we could do, is give out clothes to them.
They were from the embassy, the Spanish embassy. They were working there, and so when the embassy closed, they sent them to Madrid to live. And maybe they didn't speak the language, or they had different issues, but we had the opportunity to give them stuff to help them out. There was different ministries that work with South Asians and that people group, and so yeah.
And then the next photo. So then we did a fall festival, which was essentially started by our base leaders in Madrid. One year, the wife was like, my kids, we don't celebrate Halloween, and we always had a fall fest at our church, and now my kids don't have that, so I'm gonna make it. And the first year we did it was like 5 kids from the base, and the second year was like 20 and so forth and so on. And this year, it was raining. This year's show out was less than the previous year, which was like 120 people showed up. And this year we put up a tent and we did it anyways, even though there were a lot of COVID restrictions. We did it outside and put up a tent, and I think something like 100 people came to it, by about 50 kids and a lot of parents. And
The year prior to that, prior to COVID, how many
that's
kids?
why I said 120.
But before that was 120?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
120. And then, sorry, the year before that it was like 50, and then it was 120, and then COVID, and then this year it was, about 70, 100 people. And they did a small program where they talked about Jesus and the change of season and new life and things like that. This is a great ministry opportunity. And so we drove for a week. We were up in Madrid and then we drove back and we did this ministry. Next photo. Okay, so our school is focused on kids ministry, like I was saying before, and we bought a bunch of dinosaur suits, and these are our dinosaur suits that we go out to the parks and we have music and we go out and we do dances and we draw in a huge crowd of kids, and then we tell a story, and we is the video at the very end?
Yeah, it's at the end.
Okay, I'll show you a video at the end, but
Yeah.
we tell a story that's biblically based. It's not Jesus, it's not, if you say Jesus, a lot of people are like taking their kids and running, so it's about, being kind to one another, loving people, respecting your parents, don't steal, what else do we do? Oh, bullying was the big one, and at the end, things like you're created special, you're important, and at the end, we give a small word that is like, God has made each of us for a purpose, and then we do games and we do dancing, and so that's our program. It's about an hour, and we do that once a week during the lecture phase, and then when we go on outreach, we do it like every day in different locations. So yeah, these are our dinosaur suits. Next. For our second outreach program, we ended up going to Romania. This is our base leader and one of our students, and we took, the
Samaritan spots.
yeah, these actually right here, the Christmas boxes that you guys do. We took them from Spain. They were sent from Spain to Romania, and then we took them out to the families and gave them to these kids. Which was, I can't really show the photos of the kids. They didn't want us taking any photos of the families and stuff, but it was very special. That was just part of what we did while we were there. And we also did kids ministry there was a girls group. There's the YWAM base there in Romania had bought a plot of land, or not bought it, but were using someone's plot of land. And they had bought like a storage container, and they were doing a school in there teaching the Roma children reading, writing, things like that. So, and they had a girls program that we went and were a part of. I have the next photo. That's me telling one of the stories from our kids program to the girls, and then we did a little Christmas program because we were there in December. I think there's another photo of that. Yeah, and then we did crafts, and the girls, everybody loved us. So we were so excited. Like, it was so much fun to work with them, and then we did some street evangelism programs. It was the same idea, the kids program. We did it right in the street, and these nice Roma ladies, they were all old ladies, the babushkas, and they were like, "Oh, your son must be freezing. Oh my gosh, come into my house." And they're like letting us all come into their homes and change into a giant dinosaur suit in their house, and we came out of their homes, and it was very fun. And yeah, we were there for 10 days in Romania, and it was very fun and very fulfilling.
As well.
And yes, I felt like we made a big difference, and we were able to encourage the YWAM base there as well, and the people that work there full time. Next one. Oh, then immediately after returning from that, like the next day, we did a Christmas program right where we live at the church that we work out of. We do a food bank. And so we decided to go all in for the Christmas and do a Christmas meal for each family. So each of those boxes is filled with a Christmas meal. And we did a meal for 25 families.
Yeah, 25.
25 families. And we did a program, which I think there's another photo. We did worship. That's the families there. And there were more that couldn't fit in the church. We did a worship. We did the Gift of the Magi story, which is, I don't know if you know it, but it's the one where the woman cuts her hair off to get a watch for her husband, and he sells his watch to get a haircut for his wife, and about giving. And so that was the story we did, and we gave a small word, and then we gave out the food, and Nate is like in charge of the food bank, and he did an amazing job. He knows like everyone's name and super connected with everybody in the community, and and that was the final food bank thing we did, because we used kind of all the money to do the Christmas boxes. And so we're gonna raise some more funds. We have a couple churches, one in Sweden and some people in
Holland
Spain
as well.
and Holland, that are giving towards that to reopen it hopefully this year and continue doing that. This is worship.
Same thing.
That's from the program. So our DTS, we only had 2 students, sadly, but also it was very good because God had a lot for those 2 students. And at the very end of the DTS, the last day, right before graduation, one of our students decided he wanted to get baptized because he'd never been baptized. And so this is a short video of him being baptized.
All right. Justin, upon your confession of faith, I baptize you now in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
This is the beach right in front of our house. We live like 10 minutes walking from this place. It was very cold. This was because it's still, early spring, end of winter.
Off season.
So there was like a couple of people. We did some worship after this, and a lady showed up and was like, "That was a blessing to me, such a blessing to watch."
Upon your confession,
And he's gonna do it again. And then we have one more video, which is from our kids at the park program. Here we go. This is the dance we do for the program. We had a group from Oregon, Salem, Oregon, actually come and work with us, and they were 13 students and staff. And so that's why we were able to fill up all the dinosaur suits, because we're not even enough to fill them up in our base, pretty much. Usually we have like the little kids doing it for us, so it was really special to have them there. And and the DTS ended in February, and our students went home, and it was very sad, but also very fulfilling, and we're very proud to say we've finished our first pioneering DTS at our school. Our next one won't be till next year in January. We'll start another school. And right after we get back, there is a Bible school going on in our base. It's a 3-month program. It's like an intensive, it's called a biblical core course. So it's an intensive read through the Bible, essentially like 3 times you read through the Bible really intensively and do a very
It's fun.
deep study. Nate has done the course already.
Yeah.
And so I hope to do that eventually, but I don't think I'll be doing it in this school, just because we're in the middle of a lot of stuff. So and that's
What about the hotel?
okay. Yes, the hotel. So the previous hotel that we've been looking at was bought by another person. We're still saving funds. We have about 100,000 euros saved towards buying a property. We're looking at other properties locally. We've had a man who heard about what we were doing, and he was like, "That sounds super cool." He owns a property that's like, oh my I don't even know how to, it's very, very large. The building is like a mile long. And he's like, you guys could maybe like try, like own a part of it and I would own the other part and you guys could run your school out of it, but we're not sure, we're praying about it. But we know that God wants us to buy property, and that's what God has promised us, that we're going to buy property. And the vision we were given wasn't that hotel, it was to buy a property and to buy a hotel. So we know that even if that hotel is gone, that's not the promise. The promise was we were going to buy a hotel and own a property and start our base through that. So, yes. Anything else you want to share?
No. Yeah, the food bank, as she mentioned, we've been trying to find different ways of doing it through the government, through different private funds, and we're kind of in this transitional period. But you guys can be praying for it because those families will touch. Most of those families come from Catholic or Muslim backgrounds, and most of them would never come inside a Protestant church in Spain because of stigma, because of what it means, because you're Catholic or Spanish. And they came inside and they sat through that. So that's a win. That's worth the money. That's worth the investment to see 25 families coming inside a church that they would pass by and think, oh, what is this?
And several people have started coming to the church
Yes.
faithfully because of the food bank as well.
About 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we don't know how that's going to be. Financially, how we were doing it was private giving from Sweden, from the United States, from Holland, from Spain. But it's complicated to get that much money privately all year long, And so we trust in God that we'll be able to reopen it in some capacity, maybe through the government. But we'll see. And so just keep us in your prayers about that. And so
I think the exact prayer would be, the government wants to give to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church doesn't want another kind of church doing the same thing they're already doing. I think we're trying to take from them. And so we've had several meetings with Catholic Church, with the City Hall, and everybody's kind of standoffish at the idea of a Protestant church coming and doing what the Catholic Church is already doing. And so Spain is, like you said, extremely Catholic. And so we want to partner with the Catholic Church, not overrun them or replace them. And trying to explain that is quite difficult. So I guess that would be the number one prayer request for that part of it.
yeah, and as well, seeing the need. There's a need. There's people who they're not homeless people, but they're people of they don't have enough to get by. They're they have enough for rent and maybe enough for food, a little bit of food, but to be able to give them a little bit more so that they can use the money wisely or just live life better. I think that's the idea. They're not the homeless people. There's not many homeless people in Amangkad where we're from, but there's a lot of people who are paycheck to paycheck, let's say. And so I think that's really, we have an opportunity to touch these people's lives and show them God's love. So, yeah. Thank you for this opportunity. Breanne, could you read a passage? But before that, I just want to, introduce what I'm going to share. Throughout my life, or throughout this moment in my life, there's been a lot of transitions, a lot of changes. And I think the biggest one is just coming from having a child, this transition and this idea of being a dad. And what does that mean? And it made me think about people in the Bible and who went through many transitions, who were in the midst of changes. And there's a lot of people that you can point to. But someone I saw was Samuel in the Old Testament and all the changes he was a part of. And so when I was preparing the sermon, when I was preparing what I wanted to share, I went from Samuel 1 to 16, all those chapters, and I was like, I want to share all this. That being said, I don't think I have time to share that much and to actually do justice to what I want to say. So that being said, I want us to read Samuel call Samuel 3, the calling of Samuel, and then from there we do an overview of all those chapters, and so you can follow along, but I just want to ask Breanne to read the whole chapter.
Samuel 3, all of it.
All of it.
First Samuel 3,
Yeah.
okay. First Samuel 3. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call you, go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. Again the Lord said, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call you, go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for I am your servant am listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling, as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle. At that time I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from the beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering." Samuel lay down until morning and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision, but Eli called to him and said, "Samuel, my son." Samuel answered, "Here I am." "What is it that he has said to you?" Eli asked. "Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you." So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word.
Thank you. I think we can see through. No, let me start it again. I think in Samuel's life, he is kind of that point where it changes from the judges, where it changes from the time of Moses to the time of the kings. And Samuel was there. Samuel was someone who he was a prophet, bringing that change, bringing that transition. And even at a young age, as we just read with Eli, he was someone that God spoke to bring that to Eli, to bring that message. And I think how often in our lives are we ready to hear from God about all the changes happening in our lives? I know 2 years ago, before COVID, before all this, when we came to Spain, we had all these dreams, all these passions, all these desires to do all these different things. And then COVID happened. We could have not prepared for that. None of us could have. I think each one of us, we have been dealing with it in different ways. But in the idea, how do we deal with change? How do we respond? And how do we respond in a way, maybe as Eli did, let God do what he does, or maybe we deny it and say, "Oh, this cannot happen." And I think throughout Samuel's life, we can see these different aspects, these different situations come up, and see how he responded, and through that, we can ask the question as well, how are we going to respond when challenges and things come up in our lives? As Breanne mentioned, when Timothy, my son, was born, there was a lot of challenges, a lot of different things that came up. And I think I always would consider myself a very good faithful Christian, let's say, and someone who, yeah, throughout life, throughout life, I never had a challenge like that. So when that challenge came, all the doubts that came into my head, all the ideas, maybe we shouldn't be in Spain. Oh, maybe I can't relate to Spanish people. Maybe my Spanish isn't good enough to deal with this. So how would it be good enough to deal with ministry? And God had to reassure me. God had to, through that change, bring me back to the idea and to the mission that God has called me to do. In Samuel's life, as a child, he had this basis. He had the basis of walking with Eli, ministering at the temple. And so when God spoke to Samuel, he didn't recognize his voice though, but he had the basis of knowing how to hear God's voice from an early age. And he was scared, as it's mentioned in this passage. He was scared to share with Eli what God said. But Eli challenged him to share the truth, even though it was painful. It was painful to Samuel to share, because it could have changed their relationship, could have changed what was happening. It was painful to Eli. Later on, when the message of God, when the prophecy came true, Eli died because of the shock of what happened when the Ark of the Covenant was taken. God didn't mention that in the prophecy, but it was interesting in that passage in the next chapter how Eli was relatively okay with the death of his sons because he knew that was going to happen. But because of Eli not taking charge, not changing when he could have, this change had to happen, and there was nothing that Eli could do. I think sometimes God is telling us over and over again to change, to take charge of certain aspects of our lives before difficulty comes. But sometimes these challenges have to come, and they come, and we cannot change. It's past the due date, let's say. And that's a difficult thing to take up. I'm not talking about salvation, but I'm talking about how sometimes we get past a certain time in our lives where we can do certain things. I know as a child I wanted to be a professional basketball player. I wanted to be an athlete of some type, but I never practiced. And so when I hit 22, 23, and I realized that the people I'm watching on TV, they're that age, and they have practiced their whole entire life to do that, I realized that my time was up to do that, to be an athlete in that same style. That's a relatively minute example. But what happened with Eli was God had to cut off his family line, change the direction that they were going, because Eli did not take charge of his family, did not take charge of what was happening in Israel. He had a position of authority, but he did not say to his sons, you can't do this, you can't blaspheme. I think it's interesting. Later on, we will see that Samuel did the same mistake. His sons were not following in his ways. He more or less married Eli, his teacher. Oftentimes in our lives, we see changes of other people. We see these different challenges and things like that. But we don't take note. We don't put up a rock or some way of remembering these challenges. What happened to this person? What happened to this family member? And so we repeat the same mistakes.
Amen.
Samuel, the change that happened with him was not as severe as Eli, but it was still a change happened. And so much so that it displeased Samuel, it says in the Bible. It displeased him that the people of Israel asked for a change of leadership. My question oftentimes when I was reading that was, how did it displease him? Because it might have displeased him. If someone asked to replace me, I would be displeased as well. But it displeased him because they were asking for a king to replace God. But God had to remind him in that time of change, remind him in that time of it was not about him. That the people of Israel used this middle of a situation, the situation that happened with his sons, as not an excuse, because change had to happen. His sons were not following him in his ways. But still, it was not about him. It was not about them replacing Samuel. It was about them replacing God for a king, for a different way of leadership. And Samuel got a prophecy, had to share about what that change would mean. That change would be very negative. And the people of Israel said, we want it still. Sometimes when we're walking with different people, we realize that they want a change, and maybe that change does not include us. Maybe that change means that we have to leave. We have to take a step back. And that's difficult. When I was walking in Madrid, I came to a point where I saw different changes that needed to happen in my ministry, in my base where I was walking. And I brought those to the forefront, and those changes didn't happen. And I realized that was okay, but that I could not continue walking there if some things were not addressed. And in doing that, I had to admit that I had to leave. And that brought change, that brought where we're at now, that brought better things. But that was difficult. I was born and raised here in Washington State, but I moved to Spain when I was 18. So for me, at least, Spain is closer to home sometimes. I grew up there from 18 till now, and so my adult life was based around there. And so saying bye to there with, at the time, not the idea of going to Almainca, not the idea of going to Granada. And the same idea, that's a minute thing. That's something that's small in comparison with what happened with the people of Israel asking for a king. But in our own lives, we can get to situations where we need to move on.
Yeah.
From there, they asked for a king, and oddly enough, Samuel is the one that anoints the king. Him being a prophet, that was his position, that was what he had to do. But I don't know, for me at least, finding my replacement and knowing what my replacement would do from the prophecy, from what God had said, that this person would more or less take a position of authority that wasn't the original plan. But Samuel did it, and he did it with a clean heart, it seems like, in the Bible. It mentions that he loved Saul and that he cared for Saul quite a bit. In Samuel 16, verse 1, God, after Saul made the mistake and more or less nailed their impatience and sacrificed and did not complete his position, but did the position of the priest. And God had to rebuke him and said that your line ends. Through Samuel, in the whole process, in the whole thing, Samuel, in chapter 16, verse 1, he's mourning the loss of Saul. He's mourning the loss of his replacement, of this person that, for many of us, for myself, if I was in his position, I don't know if I would have been, I told you so. But he was mourning. And this brings up idea as well in Samuel's life. Idea that his heart was clean throughout all these different changes, all these different issues that were coming up. He wanted the best for Israel. He wanted them. But even when they did not choose the best, his heart still mourned for them, for these different situations. Saul was a male the people of Israel. He was showing them what they were like in him, being impatient in him, more or less not following the laws of what God was doing, but making sacrifices. I know in my own life, I felt like I've sacrificed so much, but sometimes God says, that's good, but where's your obedience in different aspects? Where's your obedience when challenge comes? Where's your obedience when my son is in the ICU and I'm doubting and I'm saying, God, why did you bring me here? But he says, I brought you here for a reason, and so obey. And that's a challenge. That's something that's difficult. That was difficult in the moment, and still sometimes difficult for us now, as we're chewing these different words, as we're digesting what God has given us. But as one of the songs that we sung, God doesn't change. He's not someone that's bipolar. He doesn't say something and then changes his mind. But he stays faithful. And when he calls us, he provides the way. He provides what we need. And he asks for us obedience in the midst of these changes. Trust. Oftentimes, I find it difficult. And this is me, a missionary, me, Nate, sharing. But it's oftentimes difficult to trust the full plan of God because I want control. I want to be driving the vehicle of my life. But being able to say to God, in the midst of these changes, in the midst of what you're doing, I want you to be driving this vehicle. I don't want me to. I want you to be the one leading us in ministry. I remember when I was in a difficult situation working with my best friend, and he was saying a bunch of bad things about God, and he was saying how his prayers were not working, and so on and so forth. And I remember, not me, but one of my friends who was with him in this process, had to say, it sounds like you're trying to live this Christian life without Christ. You're trying to live this life, making all these changes, trying to be holy, but for yourself, you're trying to make these changes without trusting in God, without trusting and obeying the words that he has given you in these different times and these different seasons. And so, to close, I just want to challenge each one of us to take into consideration the challenges that this last years have called upon us, and to review what happened, to review where we're at with God. I don't know what happened with you guys, what happened with each one of us because of COVID, but I know for us, many dreams, many desires had to more or less be put back before God, because we held these desires so close to our hearts and said, God, you called us here to Spain. We had to spend a few months in a house sitting because we could not leave because of different measures, different happenings in the country. But we had to trust in God and trust and say, God, you called us here, so we have to be obedient. Amen. In Samuel's life, throughout these different transitions, throughout these different changes, he stayed obedient. And I think he's a great example. And so, as well, we can take in our own time, study the book of Samuel, and ask ourselves, how would I relate to these challenges? And how do I relate to the challenges and the transitions in my own life? And so that's just my challenge for you today, and thank you for this opportunity. So I'll pray to close. Yes, Jesus. Jesus, please thank you. We thank you for this opportunity that we can just be here today. And I just ask that we just have a heart of openness to where you're leading us, a heart of openness to where you've led us through these years, through these different situations. And Jesus, we just ask that we don't let the challenges steal our obedience or steal what you've given us, but that we take challenges and we go closer to you because of them. When we're walking on the water, as Peter did, that we don't that sidetrack because of the different waves, so the different happenings, the storms and all that, but that we can trust in you. And Jesus, we just ask that in this time, in this season of each one of our lives, that we can just trust in you and learn to trust and learn to be obedient, Jesus, because as it says in Samuel, obedience is better than sacrifice. We don't want to sacrifice our lives without being obedient to you. Jesus, we just ask that in your mighty name, in the name of Jesus, God. Amen.